Hi and welcome to another thrilling episode of Outlaw Bookseller with me, Stephen E. Andrews, a writer, bookseller, collector. It's a Thursday morning, it's about 8:20. I'm catching the train to Westbury where I'm meeting Jules Burt and we're going to see Morris at Zardoz, aka All You Need Is Books, for probably yet another book haul. So the question is, how much longer will I be doing these sort of book hauls? Well, this will probably be a smaller one than usual. A couple of days ago I was at Hay-on-Wye and you will have seen that I sold a load of books. I unhauled, as they laughingly say, and I bought 6 paperbacks. Today I can't say really see me sort of buying more than 10 or 15, and probably be good value because Morris does me a special deal. And really I'm trying to sort of cut back and sort of get back to my focus of the hardcovers I need for the final library. Plus of course one has life expenses. I just managed to get the hideout back into shape yesterday after the unhaul and after a month which has been really unsat with the builders in, and then of course the boiler started to leak last night, so things are chaos again. Nonetheless, we soldier on. With so many of the dealers and dealerships now, I've kind of burned them down almost, and this may be the last visit I do to Zardoz for quite some time. I'm going to do some work with Morris next year at the Paperback Book Fair, also with Dorset Bob, and I need to get down to Bob's because I haven't been for a while. But then that'll probably be it for this year on that front.
You're just going to wait 30 years, I suppose.
That's it, yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be the same story.
I've got a handful of them in my collection.
Yeah.
I've done the Star Wars original ones. My favourite of all is I collect the Sweeney, you know, the TV show. The Sweeney.
Yeah.
So it's the Sweeney 2 in a double bill with Porridge, the movie. That's my favourite one. It's really obscure, but I just love it. If I could only have like a few up, that would be one of them.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I found out.
That's really good.
Oh, hang on a minute. Well, he's looking at the more expensive books now.
Oh, okay.
Because he knows that.
I don't know. No,
all right. I'll tell you what.
So
No. I know. No, what it is, right?
Yeah.
That lot back there are £1, right?
All right,
This lot
okay.
back here for £3.
£3.
All right,
Okay,
yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
It's
That's
good.
fine. I'll put them to one side.
She's working her way around gradually.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so keep that safe, Morris. If you would.
Oh yeah.
I think in the new year, I wouldn't afford that.
All right, yeah.
$350, but I can't now.
Yeah.
Because I've got a budget that brought with me to do.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I don't mind. I was never, it was never bought with the intention of selling. I mean, there was.
No, I know.
It was bought because it was there.
Yeah.
And it was silly.
Yeah, lovely.
Right, so here we are, and you see Jules Burt is in action there. He's moving artwork around, and Morris as well. And what's happening here is this is a little 2-room suite, I guess is the word, which Morris is opening in Westbury, which you can get to easily on the train. You can drive and just send an email and you can come along by appointment, and it's in setup now. And the books directly in front are £1, and you've got lots of higher grade stuff which is £3. And I've just picked up a load of stuff here, and you know, this is before we go to the main warehouse, and really I've already sort of almost shot my boat, as they say, so you know, but we'll see. But isn't it absolutely fantastic? So there you go. So you can get in touch, and come and see all this lovely stuff as my gear draped over everything. Now I did do some stuff with the 4K camera, but that tends not to respond well under fluorescent light, so I thought we'd go a little bit on the old iPhone. So it's all lovely stuff, as you see. And look at that, he's even got a control unit here which sort of regulates the prices of the paperbacks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's all automatic. It may look ancient, but in fact.
And if you believe that, you'll believe anything. So yeah, all sorts of stuff here. Hard rock, always rebellious. That's us. So yeah, so I say send Morris an email. I'll pop that in the description, and you can come along and pick up some good value top vintage paperback skiffy. There we are, lovely stuff.
Yeah.
artist book.
Now, of course, I get an email the other day from Jules Burt, and he says, Steve, I've decided to collect the Ace Specials. And I said, okay, mate. And I said, well, I'll keep an eye open for you. And I donated a couple of mine to him this morning, because you know me, I'm not a completist. And then while he and Morris are talking, what do we find? We find all these, including that one, which is a rare one. And it's in good nick as well. Is this a first? Let's have a quick look. This is lovely, actually. Yeah, that's a world first of the Wiltshire. You'll see all these properly in his own haul. I did a review of that on the channel recently. You've got the net. So yeah, and I brought one of these along for him, and of course we found one without a remainder punch. And the same with Howard Wardrop. I mean, what can you do? This is what happens. As long as they keep talking, and I'll keep finding these things, they stop talking and they just disappeared. How does that work?
We don't want to interfere with your presentation.
Yeah,
it's
This is what they want. I mean, it's so much more exciting than going shopping for new books now. And I guess I'm saying that because, you know, I'm an old guy, but this really turns me on. And I've picked some Zelazny, and really I am thinking about a few more and getting sort of a solid, consistent livery. Look at these Jane Yolans. Absolutely beautiful. If I was a fantasy guy, I would be in there. And of course, she's somebody who is really famous in the USA and hasn't been published over here for a long time. You know, she's sort of like big pioneering YA fantasy writer. Very good, you know, but lovely books. And these are mostly UK editions. There's some US here, but they're not really my jam. You know, look at that, isn't that lovely? You know, I could buy them just because they're beautiful, but I've got to think about space really. So there we go.
Yeah.
So that's Shaft. Richard Roundtree was Shaft, wasn't he? Yeah.
Late 70s, I think. Possibly.
I did a video.
Shaft has a book. There it is on the back.
Oh yes.
Oh, look at that. Upside down. That's a beautiful bit of artwork. We do like the Western artwork. Nice. I did a video the other night on the channel about soundtracks from the 70s, and I talked about Richard Roundtree's in Earthquake, which is one of my favourites, and he's like a black evil Knievel in that. I'm sure you've seen that. Good stuff. Victoria Principal from Dallas is in it as well. Oh. God, those are the days. So this is some stuff that I'm going to pick up, and I'll cover it in detail when I get home and do the old book haul bit. But I'm already into more of it than I thought I would be. Those Zelazny's at the bottom, I really need to sort of upgrade things and fill some gaps. So absolutely beautiful stuff. So at the main warehouse, which those of you who watch the channel will have seen before, for any newcomers, welcome aboard. And here I am at Zardoz. All you need is books, the dealer warehouse. This is a special visit. General public not allowed. This is Morris's online stock. You can send him wants list, and I've been shopping away. So this is a different location to the one we showed earlier. And I didn't think I'd be buying much today, but I do have quite a stash, and I know I need to come back again at some point and to fill some gaps in some sort of fairly classic authors. But I'm just doing a little walk around for those of you who haven't seen this before. Some of you will have seen previous videos, and this is all A format SF down here, and we've got magazines everywhere. There's magazines everywhere here, and yeah, absolutely fantastic stuff. We're going to finish off soon and go to the pub and have a pint and a catch up, because Jules and I haven't seen each other for a while. And next March I'll be zipping off to the Paperback Fair, and I'm going to be working with Morris and Dorset Bob as a guest bookseller, just for fun really, because it'll sort of keep me out of everybody's way. It'll stop me from spending too much money myself. And you know, the guys, they're hard workers and they're mates, so it'll be a bit of fun. I'll just go and do some sort of guest book selling. So you'll see that coming up next March. So I'm going to sort of have a look what I've got now and settle up. And some things I'll be passing, because I bought some upgrades today, so it'll be nice to sort of pass some things on via my own eBay or hand things on to friends and what have you. So it's been a great fun day. It really has. I've really enjoyed it, because I haven't done anything like this for ages and ages, you know, and earlier in the year I was doing it regularly, so it's just really nice to sort of get back to this, really. So I guess now I should sort of get things together. Here's my stash, and you'll see the book haul at the end of the video. I'm hoping to get this out for Saturday, but I may not have time, so it might be next week. So I'm hoping to get out on the 21st of November, but it may be at another time, as I say. Yeah, isn't it lovely? Well, talk about falling off the wagon only just after I do a unhaul, as it's ironically called, because that's not a proper word, of course. We have a book haul of fairly gargantuan proportions, as you've seen, courtesy of All You Need Is Books. Plugging it away there, plugging it away. Look at that, they've got a new design on that postcard as well. But yeah, it's a great day out with me and Jules, and I think by the time you see this, Jules's video, or at least one part of it, will have been up on the Sunday. I'm filming this on the Sunday because I've been back at work. I've got the bags and everything, so we're ready really for a bit of a sesh here. And this might not look like much, there's a lot more than this. There's about 50 books altogether to get through, so bear with me and we'll get there. This might become a two-parter, I don't know yet. Right, well, I thought we'd do this in some sort of vague chronology, and we'll do the Golden Age stuff first, then we'll move on to the more 50s stuff, then the 60s and the New Wave, and then 70s onwards. I thought there's anthologies as well. I also did some upgrading that may appear as another video, as I've just said. We'll see how long it is. I'm having some problems uploading at the moment because the house is chaos after the sort of whole builder thing, and there's been all sorts of implications of that which I won't bore you with. So let's see what we've got. We'll do a quick bit of toothbrushing in the Jules Burt style. Yeah, it's great to see Bertie. He's quite a lad, he really is. It's really good to see him. It's been quite a while. So what have we got? We've got Lynn Sprague de Camp, George O. Smith. Gosh, this text block's seen a bit of action. I know you can't see it, but you know, if you want to watch people brushing books and things, then you get yourself over to Jules's channel. So you know, and he's got the ASMR channel as well, which is crazy, isn't it? So there we go. So right, so a little bit of Golden Age. What can we say? Well, Lynn Sprague de Camp, I've not read this. I'm going to point with my toothbrush. There you go, bring some colour into it. That's one of the classic sort of time travel novels, and it's in all the reference books. Never go around to it. I do like Sprague de Camp stuff, actually. I am sort of quite a fan on the quiet. I wouldn't sort of go complete this. There's an awful lot of it. A book by him that I read a long time ago that's really stuck in my head is his biography of H.P. Lovecraft, which I let go, and it's really, really good. So if you ever see it in any format, pick it up. It's quite pricey though. And Lest Darkness Fall is about somebody who tries to sort of stop a sort of new dark age happening. And yeah, so there's sort of some proper history and stuff, and on the back you see there's a huge list of things. There's the whole Complete Enchanter series, which I like a lot, and which he wrote with Fletcher Pratt, and they're fantastic. And yeah, really nice. And I was hoping to pick up a copy of this. And you know, it's a shame, you know, books, you know, they sort of brown and what have you, but there's only so much you can do really, and that'll mean somebody will post something about vinegar or something like that. But you know, I can live with it. I've been sort of collecting old A format paperbacks, you know, since the year dot, so there we go. But I'm pleased to get that, and it has the usual Outlaw Bookseller standard of an unbroken spine. That is the basic that we go for. Then we have somebody else who I have read, and I've read one novel which I hated, and it was a later one, and I've read short stories, but this is the stories for which he's famous. This is George O. Smith, Golden Age figure, and this is a nice guy. This is really heavy, really good paper, nice heavy, look at that, Ballantine, beautiful. I love that Ballantine sigil there, and colophon, lovely. This is really, really weighty. That's good paper. This is George O. Smith, as you can see, the complete Venus Equilateral series, and these are a series which were published way back in the 1940s in the Golden Age. And yeah, I'm just loving the quality of the paper in this. Introduction by Arthur C. Clarke, and yeah, these were from 42 up to about 47. There's one later one from the 70s, and yeah, he was sort of quite famous at that time, a famous series. And I'll be honest, I don't know a heck of a lot about them. So it's basically about a space station, and we shall see. So I'm in quite a Golden Age mode at the moment. You'll have noticed that Matt Defoe was really going for it, and Matt and I have been in touch talking about that. and I've been helping him fill in some gaps in his knowledge, but he is really getting into it. And, you know, Golden Age, you have to sort of tread carefully and pick the right things, and you have to be realistic about what you're going to get. You know, the standards of writing were different then. Some of it is good, some of it is terrible, but you have to give it a try, and you have to see in its context, because this is where science fiction came from, where genre science fiction came from. There were no books with science fiction printed on their cover until the 1950s, you know, so it was all magazine stuff, and it's short things and serials which later fixed up into books. So you have to look at it, that's the beginning of things, that's why it's the golden age. So it is important that you tackle this stuff to give you some context what happens later on, because if you don't understand what happens in the golden age and how it was shaped and formed, particularly by people like John W. Campbell Jr., the editor of Astounding magazine, then you don't really see how the evolution works and how things are broken down. They really broke down big time in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's interesting how SF became less evolutionary, less revolutionary after that point, and I've talked about that a number of times on the channel, as you know. I was particularly pleased to get this nice Bruce Pennington Sphere edition of The Pawns of Null, because I have The World of Null in the same livery from Sphere. Let's get a bit of crud on it, we'll get that off. And that's pretty good as well, you know, it's seen some action. I'll give that a polish at some point as well. But I do like Van Vogt. You know, the writing at times is crude, but it's very effective. And the thing is, he just had these wild ideas which were brilliant, and there's some sticker residue there because this had a sticker on it and I've not applied anything to that yet, so I need to apply some into that to get that off, but I managed to get the sticker off without tearing the jacket underneath, so I really need to do some work on that, and that is really bugging me now, but I'm going to put it aside. So, and with a Pennington cover, you can't really go wrong, really. And Null is, you know, one of his sort of key series, really. So some nice Golden Age stuff there. Then a bit more from that time, and this is a Tor SF double, and these date back to the 80s and 90s, I think, and they're a nice little series, and some of them have sort of dreadful sort of embossed covers with gold or silver lettering on, and there's one of a Robert Silverberg sequel to C.L. Moore's Vintage Season, with Vintage Season itself, which is something I'm going to talk about in the next video, which will come up. And this is The Jewel of Bass by Lee Brackett, which I don't think I've ever read. I've read a lot of Brackett, but I don't recognise that one. I picked it up because it's such beautiful nick, look, as new, and it's also got a prequel to Lee Brackett's story by Karen Haber. Now, Karen Haber, I mentioned Silverberg, is Robert Silverberg's wife. So there you go. So there's a connection there, Thieves' Carnival. So that will be a kind of sword and sorcery thing, probably planetary romance. Let's have a look. Yeah, demigods, what have you. Yes, classic sort of fantasy there. So that'll be something to look at, because I do love Lee Brackett. And again, I mentioned Matt Defoe, and I know Matt's been really into Lee Brackett recently, and, you know, good for him. It's quite hard to find her stuff. You can get the sort of Ginger Star, the sort of Scathe things, the Pure Sword and Sorcery. A lot of the other stuff you can't get at the moment, which is a shame because she's really good. You can get The Long Tomorrow, though, is a Gollancz Golden Age masterwork, except, of course, it's a 1950s book. Sigh. Another Van Vogt, and this is a really nice Panther of Rogue ship. And, you know, there's a lot of these out there. And there is a lot of second-hand Van Vogt around these days because he is quite old school and doesn't seem to resonate with a lot of people. And, you know, with a Panther, you can't really go wrong. So I picked that up and I thought, have I got this? And I don't, which is, I'm pleased, as I thought I had. And it's lovely yellow spine there, fairly unfaded and in good nick. And again, look at that, no break on the spine, no lean. It's the usual standard. And because of my nostalgia collecting, as I've said before, you know, I tend to go for things if they're beautiful and if they have a resonance with me. And this is an edition, I would say this is late 70s, early 80s. Let's have a quick look at it. Let's see, 75. Yeah, this is a 1975, and of course Panther was going on into the 80s, so that's fantastic. And something I saw the other day, I think it might have been in one of Scott Bradfield's videos, I think it was Scott actually, was this one, The Sinful Ones by Fritz Lieber, which I've never read, and he had this edition, which is a pocketbook edition. It's got a cracking cover, look at that, isn't that fantastic? And I've never seen that one before, and lo and behold, Morris had one. So, and it's the usual standard again, as you see. There's a little chip at the top there, but it's unbroken spine, not leaning, fantastic. And I have been sort of upgrading my Lieber library the last sort of couple of years. I've not been reading much because when I haven't enjoyed them as much as I used to. And there was one which was shortlisted for Nebula, which I thought was very weak indeed for him. But I am going to do a big revisit because I remember enjoying a lot of them years ago. So another great golden age figure there. Now, to finish off the little sort of golden age tranche I've got here, I'm just going to give this a little bit of a brush, is this book. This is one of Heinlein's juveniles, Citizen of the Galaxy, in Penguin. And I can remember stocking this edition in the 80s, and I've never read it. And as I say, it is one of the juveniles, but it's here in Penguin rather than Puffin, their children's imprint. And I've been hoping to come across one of these for a while, and I've seen one or two and they've been in the State. And again, this one gets up to my standard, which is really nice. And I think this is one of the ones that has slavery. It is one of those that has slavery in it. And recently I read the book Astounding, which is like a biography of Campbell, of Heinlein, of L. Ron Hubbard, and a little bit of Van Vogt, and about the magazine and about those characters and their wives as well, and how Dianetics happened in Scientology. And you know, it has to say that Heinlein comes across as the best adjusted of all of them, the exception of Van Vogt. But Heinlein wouldn't get involved with Scientology and Dianetics, which is a good thing. But Campbell really comes across as a crank, you know, it has to be said. And as for L. Ron Hubbard, well, you know, one's opinion wasn't high, but you've got an open mind and look at the evidence. And I really have to say I didn't like the guy at all, based on the way he was described. And Heinlein said some odd things about slavery. And Campbell, said some odd things about slavery, about how it was like a learning process for certain peoples. And, you know, and I think, yeah, that's all very well and good, John, but, you know, it's not really very nice, is it? But I'm pleased to get that. So it's quite a chunky one. And I don't usually get on with Heinlein's prose. I find him very didactic and talky. And recently I've been looking at some of the early future history stories again, and it reminded me of why I didn't like most of them the first time around. The exception really is Universe and Common Sense, which together make up Orphans of the Sky. They're the exception for me, really, the Generation Starship story. But it's full of all these characters shouting at each other and talking all the time, and it's all very stagey. And it's funny enough, it reminds me of the way that Howard Hawks and Christian Nyberg did Campbell's The Thing, but there's all these characters talking over each other, and it's just really, really irritating to read. I can't stand it. So my sympathies are entirely with Matt at Bookpilled on those sort of things. We move on now to some slightly later works, and this is something I mentioned on the channel the other day. This is Brainwave by Poul Anderson, which is one of his most important books, but you never actually see many copies, and it hasn't been in print for a very, very long time. I don't think it's been in print in the UK in my time in the book trade, which is, I'm into my 40th year now. I'm sort of completing my 40th year over the next year, and it's quite shocking, really. And I'd not seen this edition again. It's Ballantine. As you see, what you have there is a chimpanzee riding an elephant, and he's armed, a bit Pota, a bit Planet of the Apes. And it's really, really nice. This is about a interesting thing where the planet Earth moves through this some sort of magnetic field, and it raises the intelligence of all the animals on Earth, and it's one of those sort of evolutionary things, and it is a good one. It's sort of up there with Tau Zero, really. So if you only ever read two Poul Anderson SF novels, you read Tau Zero and this, but I'd never seen that cover, and I think that's fantastic. And I've been looking out for a decent copy for a while, because normally you come across really cruddy ones, you know, and this is quite a nice one, so I'm very pleased with that. And then we move on to Frank Herbert, and you know, I'm Dune. We've got on and on and on about Dune, and it really is quite tiresome, and I've read it several times. My general feeling about Dune is that it has some good ideas, but it's rather overrated. The prose is quite clunky. It goes on and on and on. I'm not big on these messianic stories. It's very much a sort of religious sort of feel to it. And the way that the Butlerian Jihad is used to push AI out of the situation. You get the Mentats, the Bene Gesserit and all that. And, you know, it just feels very much like a dynastic fantasy novel instead, which is not my jam. Now, this, of course, is Frank Herbert's first book, which I have bought for... Oh, we've lost a toothbrush. Never mind. I bought this for a specific reason, which I won't tell you now. I'll tell you about it when we get round to it. This is going to feature in a future video I'm going to make. I need to do some reading first. But this, of course, was the very first novel by Frank Herbert, and I think this dates back to about 1957. We'll have a quick look now. Let's see, Dragon in the Sea, and I used to sell this, another one, 1960, Gollancz, copyright 1956, Street and Smith 53 and 56. So it was a two-parter, so it was fixed up from two parts. It's also known as Under Pressure, which is a much better title than Dragon in the Sea, and it's about a submarine and a submarine crew. It won the International Fantasy Award alongside Lord of the Flies and Lord of the Rings, which is pretty interesting. So that's way back in the sort of 50s, as I say, and I do like this cover a lot. So I am going to be talking about that because I haven't actually read this, and I do feel I've done Herbert a disservice by not reading more outside the Dune sort of area of things. Finally, we have a book which isn't that uncommon. You see this everywhere if you go somewhere like Hay-on-Wye. That's Damon Knight, Beyond the Barrier. And I have owned this before, but a really ratty one. This is a nice one. And basically, I love Hamlin SF from late 70s, early 80s. And I can remember sort of stocking some of it and never being that impressed with their list. It all seemed like cast-offs that nobody else wanted. But there is some good stuff, and they're beautiful books. Really, really lovely. So I'm glad to have that one. And this is a novel, and I say, even though I've had another copy, I don't think I've ever read it, because I do blow hot and cold about Knight. I do have my issues with him as a critic and as an editor, and I am going to address that at some point. I'm going to talk about his attitude towards definitions of SF, which I think is very lazy for somebody who's supposed to be a critic. But he wrote some great stuff. I mean, there's some amazing short stories. There's some others which are more routine. There's the odd, really good novel. So he is somebody I feel I should read more by, so I'm going to have a crack at that at some point. And maybe when I talk about Knight and his idea that, you know, you can't define SF properly, which I completely disagree with, we'll have a look at that maybe at that point. What do we have next? Well, we'll have a bit of new wave, and we'll take a look at what we've got. And we're going to sort of jump forward a bit, because this is somebody who, for me, remains a divisive figure. That's Roger Zelazny, and let's just pop. I got a few Zelazny's, and Morris had quite a few of them, and I am thinking of getting in touch and having a few more, because I have been thinking I need to sort of upgrade my sort of collection, as it were. And I used to have a nice iBooks edition of this, but I don't know what happened to it. But this is an Avon one with really, really, really nice. And look at that, it's got a little text block there. Beautiful jacket, that. And with Zelazny, my feeling is that what you go for is the early stuff. Once he gets past about the early 70s and the mid 70s, it all gets very fantasy-ish, very, very sort of fabula, and it doesn't have the sharpness of other people from the New Wave school. And I think he sort of almost crept in under the radar in a way. He was a stylist, you know, an interesting writer, and sort of themes which come up time and time again. But he did diversify a lot. But it does strike me that he was probably the most conventional, in the sense of somebody who would have a career as an SF writer who wouldn't need to step outside SF so much. And this is My Name is Legion, again a really nice Ballantine. I do like to pick up Ballantines when I can. I mean, there was a really nice Sphere edition of this which I used to sell, and this includes, it says it's got Home as the Hangman, which is won the Hugo and Nebula for 1975, and that is a good one actually. So there's all sorts of things in here, and I don't think I've ever actually read that. And it is three separate things, but I think in theory they fix up into a novel of a kind, but we shall see. Because, as I say, I blow hot and cold about him. I have read this, there's some great stuff in there. This one I've always avoided and never got around to. Timescape, as you see, very pretty, and because these were just in such good nick, that has faded quite a bit. It should be like that. Look at that, look how much that's faded over the years. But you know, that's thing, and we'll go with that and we'll see. Will I do something about Zelazny at some point? It depends really, because he is somebody I want to go back to, because a lot of stuff I've not read for a long time. But I would say if you go for the very early short stories and the first novel, This Immortal, aka And Call Me Conrad, and I've become more of an apologist over the years for Damnation Alley as well. I think it's a good little book. Moving back a little and looking at the figures who were the doyens of the New Wave, we have the marvellous triumvirate of Moorcock, Ballard and Ellison. And for a while I've been after this. This is a door, as you can see, of Dying for Tomorrow, which in the UK has always been called Moorcock's Book of Martyrs, and it does actually say that on the cover. First American publication, and I haven't read the Book of Martyrs for years and years and years. It's quite spine faded, and I've been looking out for one of these, and you see them now and again. I love that title. I actually prefer the title Dying for Tomorrow to Moorcock's Book of Martyrs, which is a good title in itself. And gosh, it's been such a long time. I don't think I've read this for at least 35 years, and let's see what's in there. Well, Dead Singer is a great story about Jimi Hendrix coming back to life. I've read that probably 7-8 times. Behold the Man, the original version. Flux, I've read many times. And yes, there's some cracking new wave stuff in there, but it's been a very long time, and I don't read Moorcock's work much now because I spent so much time reading it in the early 80s particularly, but I'm pleased to get that. And am I still collecting him? I guess I am, really. I'm still looking at variants and what have you, but mostly in paperback because I've got tons of hardcovers, as you'll have seen. I've got several Moorcock videos on the channel, but that was really nice to get. Next to that, you see the very wonderful Bruce Pelham jacket design for the Drought in Penguin. And yeah, this has got a little bit of wear there. It's not leaning or anything, and the Drought is actually my favorite of the first 4 novels, the catastrophe novels, and this is the only one I didn't have with a Pelham cover. Morris let me have that for a really decent price because these are sort of, you know, scarce books. And Jules and I were talking about the fact that there is a slipcase, which is very uncommon, but what we'd really like to see is nice big prints of these. And the Drought is the 3rd novel by Ballard, and it's just wonderful. I love it. I think a lot more of it than I do of Drowned World or in Crystal World. And it is your basic catastrophe novel, and it's got this wonderful sort of science sequence in it, which is about 25 lines long, if that. And he goes into how these polymers are in the sea, and they've unfortunately fused together, so there's this invisible film on top of the sea which is preventing evaporation, so no rain falls. And it starts, and you can't tell where it's set. You can't tell whether it's set in Britain or America, and it is one of his most powerful early works, I think, so I love it. So I'm very pleased to have that. I've got a signed Cape reprint from the mid-80s. I've got a really nice Grafton one as well, which I'll try and show you maybe a bit later on, because I'm going to do some edition comparisons, and that might be in a different video because there's so much to get through. But I was really pleased with that. Finally, in this little tranche, one of my favourite books of all time, and I have a first edition of this with this same jacket, which is by Leo and Deanne Dillon, and you'll hear their names mentioned a lot at the moment by Richard at Science Fiction Reads. Not Science Fiction Reads, Richard is at Vintage SF, sorry, because he's going through the original series of Ace specials, and Leo and Deanne Dillon did the covers for pretty much all of those. And this is Deathbird Stories, as you can see, by Harlan Ellison, and I simply had to have this because you don't see it very often, and it's in pretty good nick, and it's got the wraparound artwork, and in some ways the artwork is better represented on this than it is on the hardcover first. And obviously this has got a barcode on it in red, which I actually quite like, and these are such amazing, powerful stories. I mean, it's just incredible. I can never forget the first time I read this, and I could do with a reread because it's been a while, and there's some real favorites in here, several award winners in here, and a great book. And you know, if you've never read The Whimper of Whipped Dogs, which is based on the Kitty Genovese murder case from New York, Along the Scenic Route, which is like Mad Max, On the Downhill Side, marvelous stuff, Pretty Maggie Money Eyes, Shattered Like a Glass Goblin. Oh, it's just really great stuff in here. And The Deathbird itself, which is fantastic, which is a kind of reflection in part on the death of Ellison's dog, Abu, who sort of partially inspired Blood in A Boy and His Dog, from the beast that shouted love at the heart of the world. And beautiful artwork, look at that. I just couldn't leave that sitting there. And I am collecting Ellison variants a bit at the moment in really nice paperbacks because they're very important books to me. You know, people blow hot and cold about him. In some ways I'm glad I never met him, but really I wish I had, because I was such a huge fan of his work in the key period. But yeah, the sort of cracking, sort of uncompromising masters of the new wave here. Beautiful stuff. Then 2 female writers associated with the new wave, and it feels almost sacrilegious to have these two ladies drinking and smoking between them, but that's the irony of the then and now that we live through. And yeah, Joanna Russ, We Who Are About To, which is a great book. I do have a women's press edition somewhere, and I saw this last time I was at Morris's Warehouse, and I thought I'll pick it up. And I think this is the edition that not Matt Defoe, I'm getting everybody confused today. This is the edition that Matt at Bookpilled, I think, reviewed a while ago. And it's a great book, it's very uncompromising. And a similar book to this is Shipwreck by Charles Logan. You ever see that? Pick that up, any novel he ever wrote. And it is about a woman who is on a spaceship that crashes on an alien planet, and the crew, there's only 7 or 8 people I seem to recall, they get together and they say, you know, we've got to sort of, there's no way we're going to get off this world, we've got to have a new life, we've got to start our own civilization. And the central character says, no, you know, it's not going to happen, there's not enough of us, we've just got to accept that we're going to die. And it's quite sort of bleak, and you know, it's very brave, and I really like that sort of thing. You know, I like the uncompromising thing. I don't want comfortable answers, and I want an element of realism. And her writing's very astringent and acerbic and vinegar-like, and I really like it when I'm in the mood. Sometimes the organisation isn't always there. I feel she is challenging. Recently, Library of America have done a first book of some of her early work, which I must get, and I can't get those through my job, so I have to pay full whack, same as everybody else. Nightmare. And I must get a copy of that, and I'm sure they'll do more volumes. Important figure, and arguably the most important feminist SF writer ever, and somebody who, as you know, I've been revisiting recently is James Tiptree Jr., and this is Crown of Stars, which is a late short story collection. This is shortly after the murder-suicide pact with her husband, which is very sort of strange and controversial. And I don't think I've read any of the stories in here, and this is an Orbit book, and this is from '88, and I don't recall ever selling this, though I must have been on the list and I must have stocked it, but I can't remember it at all. But Tiptree was still somebody who was not obscure then, she was critically acclaimed, but her critical sort of cachet in the UK has risen and risen, but there's never been much in print at any given time. And I don't think there was anything in print at that time, so I'm not sure how I missed it, if I missed it, because of course, you know, it's a long time ago. But I've started to collect her a little bit more aggressively, so I'm glad to have that. And you're thinking James, well, that's the pseudonym, she used that. She's a very interesting woman. There is a video on the channel where I talk about her story, The Girl Who Was Plugged In, which is the cyberpunk precursors video, and very interesting stuff. Sometimes she comes across a bit YA in some of the stories, and other times not, but she was always kind of ahead of her time, so very interesting figure, so I was very pleased to get that. And now some 70s odds and sods, as they say, with 3 very different writers, 2 British, 1 American, and this is The Embedding by Ian Watson, which is his first novel from the mid-70s. And you know, Ian's very spiky and interesting, and Ballard called him the only ideas man in British SF at the time, which was a little bit harsh. And I've never read this one. Funnily enough, it's a Gollancz masterwork, and I do blow hot and cold with him. Sometimes I think it's often a mood thing. Sometimes I really sort of connect with him, and he has so many ideas, sometimes too many for one book. So if you're an ideas guy, he's the man. You use a lot of people standing that way, and he can be witty, but he's very good at very unpleasant characters, which is sort of bracing. And this is about a Amazon tribe who appear to be in contact with aliens on a very distant planet, and who seem to have a connection with them, which is sort of baffling the current sort of scientific thing. And as you see, it's got a very sort of Apollo type livery there. And I have been thinking about collecting more of them in Gollancz Yellow Jackets, but some of them are really expensive. This is the most expensive one, because that was his big breakthrough. And you know, he had been writing short stories for a few years before that. I think his first story was Roof Garden on Saturn, or Roof Garden Under Saturn possibly, which was in New Worlds, probably 5-6 years before this. And he'd done a lot of teaching and traveling. He was a teacher in Japan at one point. Never met him, had a few sort of interactions online, and he did a blurb for the back of one of my books. You know, interesting chap. So I have been trying to decide, am I going to sort of fill my gaps with paperbacks, or am I going to go for it a bit more on more of the Gollancz Yellow Jackets? It's really hard to know. And speaking of gap filling, I mean, somebody with a huge oeuvre, whose work I've always enjoyed when I've read it, and I've probably read about 12 or 13 of his books, maybe a few more, and he's written at least 100, is Brian Stableford. And this is one you don't see very much. This is from 1979, The Walking Shadow. And great sort of Dali type cover, that, with these figures which are silver. And I had a look at the back, and it seems to be about some sort of messiah figure called Paul Heisenberg, who transforms into what appears to be a silver statue. And just reading about made me think of some of Silverberg's more messianic things, like Warner 19. So I thought, I'm up for that. And I'm trying to decide how far I'm going to go with Stableford. He's one of those writers, John Brunner's another, where you can get a lot of their books fairly easily, fairly cheaply in places like Hay and Wire, and they're dotted around. And I don't want to go completist with either, but I am thinking, do I want to get more? Because they're usually like a couple of quid, you know, and it's good solid stuff. And I'm probably more inclined to go closer to completism with Stableford, but I haven't read any for ages. But if you want to read a really great space opera, and you know me, I don't like space opera, the Hooded Swan series, which are Pan Lozenges in the UK, about star pilot Granger, they're absolutely fantastic. They've got real poetry in them. They're very short and sharp and economical, and they move very quickly. Great characterization. Then of course there's the Daedalus series as well, which again I think Matt Defoe has talked about, and they're marvelous things as well, really good. Met him once, wrote an amazing book about the sociology of SF, and you know, real scholar and great stuff. So am I going to go with a bit further with Brian? I think I probably am, actually. Then we get a farmer, and this is a farmer I used to have and I got rid of, and I always sort of regretted it really, because I love that title, Two Hawks from Earth. And this was originally published in a shorter version as The Gate of Time, and I love this jacket, and it's got the same artwork on the back. Isn't that great? And the title just does it for me. But it's not literal. It's not about two hawks from the planet Earth. It's about a guy who's called Two Hawks, and I seem to remember he's got Amerindian sort of descent, and it's your fairly typical farmer pastiche of Burroughs. You know, it is a straight adventure novel, and it's sort of padded out here, and he ends up on a parallel world, so it's got sort of hints of gore as well. But you know, Farmer does these things really well. So it's ace, you know, you can't really go wrong, and it's just very beautiful. So I probably won't read it again, but I just sort of feel I should have it in the collection. And I used to have a lot more Farmer than I've got now, and I got rid of a lot. Again, I flirt with completism up to a certain date. To me, he really went off the boil late 80s and early 90s. But, you know, at his best, he's just marvellous. It has to be said. So we're ending up this part of the video with a real miscellany of three almost seemingly unrelated things completely. And here we have my beloved Chelsea Quinn Yarborough, who I love, my favourite living fantasy writer. And this is Ariosto, which is one of her most acclaimed books, but I've never read it because it's always been quite uncommon. This is a tour edition. And Ariosto was a real person in Renaissance Italy. He was a poet, and he wrote a book called Orlando Furioso, which has been a Penguin classic for a million years, and which I must admit I've never read. And it stays in print, and you never hear much about it, but it is one of the classics of Italian literature. And I think the Medici family were his patrons, or his publishers. I'm not quite certain, so I need to research. I need to look into that. And this is one of Chelsea's higher sort of rated books, and she is brilliant with history, but it is a fantasy novel, so I'm looking forward to getting into that. I've now got probably about 8 or 10 of her books I haven't read, which is great, because normally when I read them straight away. And I've been reading one recently which is like a horror novel, and it's about fires breaking out, and I can't recall the title, and I've actually put it down because it's quite long. It came out in the late 80s, and I get the feeling that it's a bit padded. The writing's really good. Her writing's always really good. You know, she's really talented. She can write anything, but I have sort of felt that it's been padded for commercial reasons. But I'll go back to that when I'm in the mood. But it doesn't feel like one of her more substantial books. But this one, as I say, is in all the reference books. I'm looking forward to that at some point. And I must do another video about her at some point, because I really love her stuff, and I really think it would be lovely to see more people reading her work. So as part of my sort of am I going to, am I not going to, what side am I going to come down on, thinking about Ian Watson, this is Chekhov's Journey, which sort of I'm really interested in. And I guess the fact that I bought this, and you can get, this is sort of late sort of 80s, mid-80s Granada one. As you see, the title's faded away completely. I know it's mid-80s because it's Granada. They become Grafton in late 85, 86. And this is about a Soviet film company who are going to make a film, I think, about Chekhov. But it's about Chekhov's knowledge of the Tunguska explosion in Siberia, which I think was in 1906. So that's sort of meshing those sort of things together. So I'm expecting a kind of chewy, crunchy, spiky, sort of Strugatsky Brothers type thing, really. And this has got interesting ideas, and it doesn't always have a great reputation, this book, but really it is going to be pretty interesting because I think there's some great ideas there, and I do love these liveries. So maybe as I see some more, I'll pick some up. And you see, that will stop me from going out there and spending, you know, a lot of money on a Gollancz Yellow Jacket. And this is an uncommon one. You can find them, but more often than not, a lot of them went to libraries, so they're in a total mess. And, you know, I don't do that, as you know. I'd rather have a decent paperback. So that's another reason. And I am thinking about his trilogy. There's The Book of the River, The Book of the Stars. I can't think what the other one's called. There's one called God's World. Those are sort of 80s ones, which I've never read. So we'll see what happens with them. But, you know, good, solid writer, unique. You know, when you read him, you know there's nobody like him. And the person who's most like him these days is probably Adam Roberts, I would say. Adam's probably a little bit wittier, but, you know, Ian has his knockabout moments, it has to be said. Then a book you can still get, but you can only get it in B format. It's a different jacket now, it's not so nice. This is from the early 90s, and this may be his first novel. This is Simon Ing, City of the Iron Fish. And Simon does a lot of science writing these days, and he's really good, and he's got very sort of M. John Harrison, Richard Grant type prose style. I don't always get on with his work. I reviewed Wolves on the channel a while ago, and in Capri you'll have seen me reading his mainstream novel The Weight of Numbers, which is fantastic. But his SF novel Painkillers, which came out I think about 2004, is one of the best SF novels I've read this century. It's near future and it's only just SF, but it's really good. This is more skiffy-esque, and as you see, you've got these little sailing ships down there, and you've got this crazy landscape, and it's quite chunky. And this is sort of HarperCollins from the early 90s. I think it's 92 or 94. And yeah, and I do really like his stuff generally. I always like his writing, whether the books come off in a broader sense. I mean, the problem I had with Wolves was that it seemed relatively insubstantial, even though I liked the actual writing itself. As an SF novel, it didn't quite do it for me, but I've been looking for one of these in good nick for a while, so it's great to have that, because I would much prefer to have an old A format. But if you've not read Simon, do check him out. Check out Painkillers. He is kind of neglected, really. It's a shame. He's the sort of SF writer who's out of step with what's happening now, but the best people are the people who are out of step. You know, he doesn't sort of pump out space operas and stuff. He's a bit more thoughtful than that. So Simon Ings, watch out for him. Good stuff. Finally, for this part of the video, and the main part of the haul, there's anthologies to come, and there's some upgrades to come as well. I just had to get this because I hadn't seen one that was this nice in years, and I have read it. And this, of course, is the classic horror exploitation novel from the 70s, The Rats by James Herbert, in its definitive cover design and Enya livery. Look at that. There's a little bit of a lean, but it's not too bad. It's not actually broken. And, you know, it's not, in a literary sense, it's not amazing stuff, but it is an iconic book of its time. And, you know, it had that cover for years, and, you know, they should never, I remember when they changed it, and that was a bad idea. And it had this cover a very long time, and I seem to remember, I think I wrote something in a fanzine or something when I talked about how changing the covers was a bad idea and just leaving them the same, and that's great, isn't it? So a classic sort of schlock horror novel in its definitive cover art and livery. Marvellous. I'm going to reread her, actually. That'll be a good bit of fun. So thanks for joining me for this video and for going through this part of the haul. There is a lot more to come in part 2, where we'll be looking at anthologies and also looking at the upgrades I've done, and I'll be comparing the old editions that I have with the new ones I'm replacing them with, and we can look at the different cover designs and what have you. Bye for now. See you soon.